Welcome to Music and Medicine. Welcome to Music and Medicine.
Welcome to Music and Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Moshe Lewis.
Welcome to Music and Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Moshe Lewis. I am so excited. I'm ecstatic to be sitting with Preston Glass. You have heard his music, seen him, and probably it's so ubiquitous, you don't even realize how much this young man has accomplished. 6 BMI Awards. He has worked with every major artist on the planet. He's had 30 top 10 hits, 30. I mean, that just blows my mind. Whitney Houston, Aretha Franklin, George Benson, Kenny G. I mean, the list just goes on and go on forever, the stylistics. He's worked with so many artists that it's just not even funny. Welcome, Mr. Glass.
Thank you so much for having me, Moshe.
Sure, definitely a delight. So I kind of always like to look back in time just a little bit and just talk about how you got inspired to first write, because that is not something that is a typical character for somebody so young. And I think you said you weren't even really aware that you were writing. It just came that naturally to you.
Yeah, it's definitely a gift, but yeah, I started writing so young, like age 6, I believe, and I wasn't really sure what I was doing, but I had an older brother, and my father told me, you know, you're writing songs, you're coming up with something nobody else came up with, and people make a career out of that. So immediately I was struck by that truth, and I said, okay, well, I like doing it, so I'm going to do it every day. So I started doing it with a lot of research. Like I started studying records, and back then it was records, and it became
Right.
it is now. But I really appreciated. I noticed the music that I liked was usually written by the same core group of writers, like, you know, the Motown staff, or
Yes.
maybe it was Carole King and Jerry Goffin. Them guys, I like their writing. Burt Bacharach, I liked his writing. And they weren't necessarily the artists, but they wrote for really famous people. But the obvious people that I was attracted to were the songwriters.
Right.
So that's, I guess, a natural thing for me to want to be like them as a kid. I'd like to be that way.
Sure. And how old were you at the time, just to put it into context?
Yeah, you know, 7, 8, 9,
Wow.
right in that area.
Sure.
And but I knew that early on, okay, I want to do this. I like sports too, but I was too short. I wasn't really buffed, you know.
Right.
But so I enjoyed that on my hobby days. But I really started putting the time in at that early age of writing, playing, studying music, learning how to score, learning how to read and write music. You know,
Right.
back then you had to know how to do that stuff to even compete. Reading,
Right.
notating. Of course, you don't have to do that now, but it really helps to have that in my hip pocket.
Absolutely. And was that formal training that you had, or did it in high school and things?
Yeah, I guess starting out, no, just playing by ear, but then because it became such a passion for me, my parents and my family said, you need to take musical theory and really learn what you can learn, since you sing like you have a gift. So I did that maybe age 11, I think 11, 12. I started taking musical theory on arranging and all that stuff, knowing the character of each instrument, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. And how at such a young age did you come to learn about somebody like Mr. Bell, Mr. Thom Bell?
It was really initially the same thing I was just mentioning, by hearing these records that just kind of came off the speakers. I was like, wow, listen to that. And I noticed his name kept popping up on records I liked. And I was like, back then I didn't know it was Thom Bell. I thought his name was Thom Bell, because
Right.
THO.
Right.
But I was like, man, I like that guy's music. And never knew I would ever meet him, let alone ended up working with him for quite a few years.
Right.
But yeah, it was because I was attracted to that sound. He had a way of making making pop and R&B and soul music, combining that with his classical training, and brought in the beauty of the strings and his knowledge of it. So,
Sure. What were some of those songs or artists that you can recall?
it was like the Delphonics and the Spinners, the Stylistics, songs like "Bet You by Golly Wow" and all that stuff from the Stylistics, and then "Didn't I Blow Your Mind" for the Delphonics, and then "Could It Be I'm Falling in Love" on the up-tempo side for the Spinners.
Yes.
I mean, just those arrangements. You know, after working with him, I found out his secret. He said, "You got to catch people in 15 seconds." Now it's even more time, even less. But back then, you know, so 15 seconds, a lot of times the singer hasn't come in yet.
Right.
So that's why all those intros of all those records he producers are so captivating.
Right.
And then when the singer comes in, if they're a good singer, it's like, okay, game over. This is a great song.
Right. And you hinted at it. Do you sense that some of those key elements are missing today? We're either going too fast or not really putting as much into the instruments, using actual instruments, things of that nature?
Yeah, I believe that. That's why I try and inculcate into some of the youngsters that I come across some of the things that I learned, even though they may not feel they need to learn them. I think it will help their craft, whether it's songwriting or being an artist, singer, or a sax player or whatever. But yeah, the fact that a lot of people, I call it microwave music because they put it in fast. Everything's moving so fast. But I think the music that moves people the most is the music that kind of simmers, and you know, it takes time to create it, and there's some passion and thought behind it. Sometimes it comes out, but that usually is a result of your being a pro at it. You know, it's a craft.
Right. And then from there, you worked with Mr. Narada Walden. And how did that association develop?
Ironically, okay, I was a staff writer with Mighty Three Music, which is Thom Bell, Campbell, and Huff. They're the
Right.
Mighty Three. And some of the songs, I was writing so many songs that, you know, Thom Bell didn't have enough projects to use
Wow.
all these songs. So I said, you know, I got to get more songs out there. So I started sending my songs out to different producers, even though I was signed with Tom, and I
Right.
would use his letterhead.
Right.
So Narada was a fan of Thom Bell too, and so
Right.
he got this tape of about 10 songs of mine, and I think that was he told me the initial reason he opened the envelopes because it had Bellboy music on it.
Sure.
And I said, oh, this cat worked with Thom Bell, and he liked immediately one of the songs on that first tape I sent him, and used it on a Stacy Lattisaw album.
Yes.
And we started communicating. He said, you ever get down to the Bay Area? I said, I used to live in California before I moved up to Seattle to work with Tom. He
Right.
said, well, next time you come down here, I'd like to collaborate with you. So that when he said that, I just went there next week.
Right.
Anxious. So immediately we started working together, and we've been working together for about 40 years now.
Wow. When you made that initial transition, what are some of the things you feel like you had left with? You'd already been writing quite a bit on your own, and then you work with Mr. Bell, and just in that moment of making that transition, what are some of the pearls you felt you walked away with, besides, like you said, that 15 seconds of how important it is for the intro and the build-up?
There's so many things that Thom Bell taught me, not only directly but indirectly, like you know, but directly, some of the things he said. And when you work with people, it's a people industry. He said one of the things he said, your songs were okay, but one of the reasons why I wanted to work with you, not so much that your songs are great, because I like you. I like you as a person. So remember that when you work with other people, you know, a lot of times people may be talented, but they're hard to get along with. Right. And that makes life miserable. Try and avoid those situations, he told me. You know? And that's good advice. You know, I use that to this day. And,
Absolutely.
just little things, little tidbits. One of the things I was telling this journalist the other day about this, that when Thom Bell first started working with the Spinners, he was asked by Atlantic Records, what artists, you're hot now, you can work with any of our artists. We got Aretha Franklin, they named a couple others, and they thought he would gravitate to, oh, I'll work with Aretha, of course. But Tom said, no, she don't need me. And he picked a name that was barely penciled in, a newly signed group called the Spinners, because he could remember how they sounded. He told me, I had heard that story before, but he told me, I always try and pick artists that would appreciate what I bring to the table, because if I had worked with Aretha, it would have been, she wouldn't say, oh, the reason for my success is Thom Bell. Well, of course, we know that's not, Aretha's her own girl.
Yeah.
And, but now you might hear the Spinners say that. Oh, yeah, Thom Bell is the reason. So try and pick artists that really need your help.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
And since you happen to bring her up, tell us how another one of your hits, Who's Zooming Who, how that song came to be and how she got songwriting credit on that.
Okay. Yeah. So I was working with Narada Michael Walden at this time, and he was, of course, known as an artist and drummer, but he was starting to make his inroads as a producer, and was very excited about the opportunity to possibly work with Aretha Franklin. Clive Davis asked him, if you give us the goods, and yeah, you can produce her album. So he gave Narada Aretha's number, and Narada called her up, but Clive had told Narada, she's very creative, even in her speaking. So Narada said, man, I bet she's got some good ideas we can come up with just by talking to her. So I want you to be on speakerphone and jot down whatever she says. So sure enough, that first conversation, I'm Narada, we're going to be working together, and we're going to be crafting some songs for you. Other than, talking about music, I want to know more about you. How's your love life? She said, oh, great. Sometimes I forget I'm Aretha, I forget I'm Ree. I go into a club, it's like I see a guy and I'm checking him out, but I forget that I'm Ree, and he's checking me out. So it's like, who's zooming who?
Right.
She said that. We wrote that down and made a song out of it. She didn't know we were writing down stuff. And after she heard the demo of the song and liked it, we said, oh, you're going to get co-writers on this because you came up with that title. She said, I did? I didn't know. She forgot she said that. So that's how that happened.
And in a similar vein, Freeway of Love, which is just, such a unique title for the time.
Yeah, Freeway of Love. I didn't write that one. Narada Michael Walden wrote that with Jeffrey Cohen, but it was a song he had written for himself. And I guess the way Narada writes is if he doesn't end up recording it on an album, he just tosses it and goes on to the next. But I remember that song that he didn't use. So when it came time for Aretha's album, I said, what about pulling that song out, Freeway of Love? At first he was like, no, that's old news. But then I said, let's let the rhythm section rehearse it kind of in that Motown style, because Aretha's, even though she wasn't on Motown, she's Detroit,
Right.
Give her that drive. And then when the rhythm section was starting to play it, he said, oh, man, great idea. Let's do it.
Absolutely. So I think that brings us to sort of another way of dissecting that earlier question. What are some of those elements that you're looking for to really help embellish? Because you were being very modest before, saying, well, sometimes they said my songs were okay, but you really have studied and put the work in and then worked with some phenomenal artists. But taking it up that next notch, what were some of those elements that you liked trying to add and include in music that you felt would really give it that over the top, maybe really truly make it a hit?
One of the unique things I think I do, and I don't really know what first started me doing this, but because I think I started doing it before I was professional. when I was writing as a kid, but coming up with unique song titles,
Yeah.
titles or themes that would be, thought provoking. If someone maybe they didn't hear the song yet, they just heard the title and like, wow,
Right.
what's that about? Well, for instance, like Who's Zoomin' Who, or I had a big hit called We Don't Have to Take Our Clothes Off.
Right.
I think that title makes people go, well, what is that about? And
Right.
then, of course, you got to make the song catchy, and I try and do that. So I always start with a title, and then I write the music and melody, making sure that the title fits real nicely with that melody, and then I'll write the lyric after. But if you have a real unique or thought-provoking title, the song kind of starts writing itself lyrically. And
Right.
so I don't always write the same way, especially when I collaborate, but that's one of the ways I like to write.
Sure. If you had to pick, I know there've been so many, 3 collaborations because there were things where you felt you grew an inch that day or really learned a lot from the artist. Who might be 2 or 3 of those people or some of those types of stories?
Wow. Artists I've worked with, uh,
Yeah.
Earth, Wind, and Fire, definitely. Maurice White
Wow.
in particular.
Yes.
Johnny Mathis, just because he was my mother's favorite artist, and now I'm in the studio working with him, and he's
Right.
so humble.
Yes.
Wow, he wants to learn from me. I'm trying to learn from him. He wants to learn from me, and he told me that he learned a lot from me
Mm.
about how to ad lib, and he never knew how to do that. That's what he said.
Right.
So him, George Benson, maybe. Um, yeah, that's 3, I think.
Sure. No, absolutely. And on the converse, what type of people skills, since you brought up before, did you feel you had to implement, even if you can't say the artist, to really try to help either deal with their sense of perfectionism and or ego and or reputation?
Yeah, that's a good question. What's interesting about working with Narada is we have kind of like 2 separate personalities. He's very vibrant, very outgoing, very spontaneous,
Right.
and I'm kind of like the yin to the yang with him,
Yeah.
kind of organized and this.
Right.
And I think you know at times uh, I thought, well, he's not he won't listen to what I'm doing. He's got his but he pretty much told me he liked that about me. And so
Mm.
hence 40 years later, here we are still
Right.
writing songs. We just had a release on the Temptations.
Right.
And
60
yeah,
was
60. So I don't know if that answered your question, but personality wise, it showed me that just be yourself, do what you do. Don't try and somebody once taught me a long time ago that the world is revolving, constantly goes in a circle.
Mhm.
Don't be chasing somebody else's style. Just stand still and do what you do, and the world will come back to you
Sure.
eventually.
Yeah.
So if there's fad or a style or something going on, and maybe you're not, you're feeling dated or you're feeling like, but if you really are good at one particular thing, don't worry, it's going to come back.
Mm.
That's served me well.
Sure. Let's talk about an example like that in an artist who may not have been riding high and potentially overlooked and maybe even was about to be dropped, and yet you essentially came in and saved the day, and that would be Kenny G.
Oh, huh. Yeah, that was an interesting project and story. A lot of people think it was his first album just because he wasn't really worldwide known. But yeah, you're right. It was, I believe, his 4th album, and he was pretty much. This was his last shot, at least for Arista Records. They were getting ready to drop him, and hence that's why I think I got the opportunity. Okay, let's let this young guy. He's pretty good. we don't got much of a budget, but he'll do anything. So that's how I got the project. But what was great about that, we had a freedom that maybe we wouldn't have had maybe if it was so, so much pressure on us. So I remember talking with Kenny about let's just make an album that you love and I love, and then at the end of the day, if our hearts like it, maybe it'll reach someone else's heart. And sure enough, that's what happened. But of course, it came out the box a little slow. First two singles kind of flopped. So I'll have to give Kenny credit for telling Arista Records, please release Songbird as the third single, and then everything exploded. And then they re-released the first two singles. They exploded. So that was a great experience. That was the first album I ever produced by myself. I had co-produced some things with Narada Michael Walden, but so not bad for a first production there.
No, absolutely. And how did that feel? Was there a moment along that pathway where you really almost did have to pinch yourself and say, I definitely have arrived. I'm truly capable of making a living doing this, and also making a hit out of, essentially something that didn't exist before, meaning that this wasn't someone who already had multiple awards or multiple top selling songs.
It's funny that question. A lot of that, knowing that I've arrived, or knowing that I'm successful, or knowing that has really happened kind of just recently to me. I mean, it's probably because I was always just working, go on to the next, doing 2 or 3 different things at once. In fact, that very album, Duotones by Kenny G, had to be done from midnight to 8 a.m. because I officially was working for Narada in the daytime for what he was producing. Right. So he said, I'm not paying you as a producer. If you want to do that, you got to do that on off hours. Yeah,
sure.
So that's what happened. That whole album was done from midnight to, in fact, I think that title, there's a song in there called Midnight Motion. Right. I think that's where that title came from.
Exactly. Yeah. Working during the night. Let's go 180 degrees the other direction and talk about working with somebody like George Benson, more matured, already with quite a belt around his waist, and more we'll say exacting.
Yeah, he definitely was a perfectionist, but I was fortunate to, Narada produced an album on, not a whole album, he did like 3 cuts on an album called While the City Sleeps. So Narada did like 6 songs on that. That's right. And I wrote 3 of the songs. One of my favorites was Kisses in the Moonlight, which is one of George's, I guess, greatest hits. But I got to just be a musician on that, and a co-producer on one song. Right. And so I didn't really have the pressure on me as far as the record company saying, you got to do this, you got to do that. Was Narada having to deal with George in the studio. But it was a great training ground, because right after that was when I started producing a lot of things, and I ended up producing some cuts for George later. Right. So I got to see firsthand what a perfectionist he was, and it was great working with George. In fact, we're still friends today, and he's turned me on to a couple artists he wanted me to produce and develop under my wing. So he's like an older brother to me. Yeah.
Sure. And just, I also want to define for the viewers, because sometimes I think it's easy to take for granted. It really isn't something that most people will get to do in their life. Talk to us about production and being a producer. So really what that entails, because again, I think it's a word that is used in different contexts. And I think that it's easy to take for granted, when in reality, it's more than just the icing on the cake. It's almost the entire foundation.
Yeah, I think production in music, or making recordings and records or CDs or whatever, that has kind of changed over the years. Producers back in the day, they would sit behind the board maybe, or they might not even come to the studio at all.
Mhm.
You know, musicians work it out with the arranger and the artist, and that's it. But of course, once producers that really had a stamp, you know, like the Phil Spectors and Quincy Jones, of course, once those came along, then producers started to have a more distinct role. And then I think with all the Motown guys, Smokey and Holland Dozier and Holland, of course, Thom Bell and Gamble Huff. And then even more recent, you know, with Babyface and Jam and Lewis, those guys. I know you interviewed Leon Silvers. He's another guy.
Yeah.
They really put a stamp on the recordings they make. So I think producers now put a stamp on what artists they work with. Sometimes it's the sound. I think in my case, I think I come across more. I'm not comparing myself to him, but I notice when Quincy Jones produces a Frank Sinatra,
Right.
it's a lot different than Michael Jackson. I mean, the
Right.
sound, you know, and that's only because each artist you get into what they do, get into their bag, and then try to develop it from there. Like, you know, I did Kenny G, but I'm not going to do Earth, Wind and Fire like Kenny G, and
Right.
vice versa. And Johnny Mathis definitely not that way. So I'm not like one of the Jam and Lewis kind of guys or LA Babyface. They have a sound which I
Right.
love them guys.
Sure.
But I guess I approach producing like get into the artist, find out what not only what they're about, but what do you want to do? What do you need to do? Like in the case of Johnny Mathis, of course, I had been listening to his records all my life, my mom being a big fan.
Right.
But the reason I got hired was because he wanted a more youthful sound and the record company as well.
Yeah.
So if I relied on his past recordings, I wouldn't be doing my job. So they wanted my sound. So that's how I got the project. So I have to consider that as well as a producer. What is my role in this particular project?
Sure. I think that's good segue for we talked about somebody like Kenny G, really almost just getting started, somebody like George Benson, quite polished and demanding. What if we go middle of the road and talk about what it was like to do that for somebody like Whitney Houston?
Well, I didn't produce Whitney. That was Narada Michael Walden. I had the good fortune of playing on maybe her two biggest, well, maybe one of two of her biggest records, which
Sure.
I Want to Dance with Somebody,
Right.
and How Will I Know,
Right.
which both going to be featured in this new movie. I guess is coming out in December about her life, called I Want to Dance with Somebody. But and here's the 6 Degrees of Separation. Both of those songs were written by George Merrill and Shannon Rubicam,
Mhm.
who came from what camp? Thom Bell. Thom Bell had signed them to Bellboy Music. They never really got hardly any cuts with Tom. Phyllis Hyman did a couple. But as soon as they became Boy Meets Girl and were their own artists, and they were signed to Almo Irving, then started getting the cuts. But they reconnected with me, and that's how those songs, you know, kind of connected with Narada. And so anyway, but with Whitney, I was fortunate to have a big part of the second album, which I think I arranged or helped arrange with Narada, about 7 or 8 of them. And I did have one song as a songwriter on there. And I saw her evolution. I mean, you know, going from just a young, phenomenally talented young lady to a superstar. I mean, like, you could see it in the, you know, she come to the studio, the first album, she didn't know what it was going to sell.
Right.
Second album, boom, there are people like, Miss Houston, you know, and you know, you can't get in the studio if you're not a part of the session. You can't. No.
Right. Big difference there. Also, I wanted to talk about artists that you had the chance to work with that are so different, like Teena Marie.
Yeah, what was interesting with that is it was just one day in the studio, but it was
Mhm.
a song Out on a Limb that she wrote and produced.
Right.
And I just happened to be part of the rhythm section. But she displayed her unbelievable talent, not only on the musicality of directing the session, but when she sang, she was like performing on the mic. I mean, she was
Mhm.
dancing, she was, expressing herself. It wasn't just, doing a vocal.
Right.
So, I knew I was seeing a great artist when I saw Tina.
Absolutely. And with these different artists, how do you, I think, expressed it a little bit when you said Johnny, that you sort of listen, to some of their music, but still have to come up with a different sound. How do you sort of really prepare to work with someone when, like you said, you are having to go in a different direction and have to somehow do something that you haven't done before, literally?
Yeah, it's a fun. It's really exciting to do that. Like
Mhm.
if I was told, "Oh, okay, just give me more of the same old you are," maybe
Right.
that wouldn't be as exciting. But I think it's like with Earth, Wind, and Fire. It was kind of mind boggling. Like, what do you want from me? You guys are geniuses. I mean, you don't need any help from me. And I found out they just pretty much the same thing as the Mathis thing. They said, we want some new blood, want some young blood, and
Mhm.
see what you. So it was like creative freedom to just that's what they want. They don't want me to just give them more of the same.
Right.
So
And you were saying that sometimes the lyrics would just be essentially gibberish, just stuff to
oh
simple and
yeah,
pull things
yeah,
in.
yeah, yeah. Well, you know, on a lot of the stuff that I did with them, with Maurice, he just showed me that simplicity really matters. You wouldn't think that maybe, because Maurice White is, he's a brilliant guy.
Right.
A lot of the great songs, "That's the Way of the World,"
Yeah.
they had really powerful lyric. Of course, the music was phenomenal. But I remember when I was getting in the room to write with him, I was like, "Oh, I've got to step up on my game lyrically. I know he's going to come with some," and he was coming up with such simple lines. I was like, "Is this really Marie?" In my mind, I was thinking. But then we became friends, and he started telling me, don't make it too heady.
Mhm.
And then, of course, we know the story about September, and how I think Allie Willis had told me that she wanted to change the body
Mhm.
something, and Marie said, "No, keep that."
Right.
Yeah. So writing is you know it's exciting to me every time I get a chance to write for a new project. Um, it's like getting an empty canvas
Right.
with some watercolors, or maybe not even colors yet. I th- I c- I think the process of writing and producing affords me the opportunity to do some pencil
Mm.
stuff when I'm writing, and then what gives it the color is more of the arrangements or the production. Because once you have something in pencil or black and white, it could go any kind of way color wise. It all depends on what you envision the colors to be. And so, like this painting behind me, if that was black and white,
Right.
that'd be one thing. But my wife painted that, so
Oh, wow.
the color she chose makes it what it is. She could have chose totally different colors.
Sure. Who might be an artist that you did something like that with, where you even surprised yourself and almost felt like you had to pinch yourself for a minute to pull this song out of the creativity or out of the artist to get them to give a performance that maybe they may not have expected they could do?
That's a good question. Oh, wow. I probably have done that more recent when I'm working with newer and younger artists that
Mhm.
and they're maybe not as confident.
Right.
And, but let's see. I had a few songs that have been out there that didn't really see the kind of light of day that I wanted.
Right.
It was a song that Lionel Richie did that Narada produced it, and I wrote it with Walter Afanasieff
Right.
and Randy Jackson and Narada, and I thought it was going to be a smash,
Right.
and I will never forget. Lionel was like, "Man, you guys brought it out of me. I didn't, he's known for the great ballads, but
Sure.
this was like a hard driving, dance tune
Right.
called Night Train." Yeah.
Yeah. No, just simply amazing to listen to, sort of reminisce. What do you think are some of those elements? You've given us a few, and just want to make sure we hammer that nail, that make a song a hit. Because I get the sense from you that you write to write, and you write to enjoy the process. You're not really always writing for the sales receipts per se. But what are some of those elements though that you think do that's what makes a song a hit?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the genre of music, but some people call it hook,
Mhm.
some people call it chorus, some people call it sing along. But yeah, what grabs the person, what makes them sing along to something, and in my opinion, it's like it is a combination of lyric and melody and title, but I'm a melody guy,
Mm.
and when I say melody, I don't just mean the notes, but I mean the rhythm. Like I'm trying to think of an example, but something that so catchy. Uh, Billie Jean, okay,
Mhm.
not just the Billie dun, 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 that's rhythmic, right?
Right.
Dun, 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 dun. This part always gets overlooked, but I think it's what makes the hook. That I am the one looking in that's a really unique melody.
Mhm.
Dun, 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 dun. So Michael was a genius, and those kind of things I think make a hook. But Michael, even that's why I choose melody over lyric a little. It kind of edges it out because
Mhm.
I think if you'd have had any words or maybe no words on that, just that melody, dun, 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 you know, that's why Michael, when he wrote a lot of stuff, it was like chum on. I mean that was always became a joke, but it was actually stuff he just came out of his mouth when he was coming up with the lyric.
Right.
He would write the lyric later.
Right.
So because that's the first thing that caught his brain. And same thing happens with me when I'm writing, whether it's an up tempo or a ballad. I might have the title, but then after that, I don't have nothing else.
Mm.
Just some gibberish until, okay, I love this melody. I love this rhythm. Now let's write the lyric. Because then you're not constrained by your lyrics can uh, they have to fit that melody. Your melody is not constrained by lyrics. Sometimes when someone wants me to write a melody to their lyric,
Mhm.
I find sometimes it's a little constrained. Well,
Sure.
I hear the melody going here, but I can't do that because
With
the
those
lyric
words.
is
Right.
saying that. Yeah.
So that'd be sort of a not ideal that the artist comes in with all these lyrics already written, but not the music.
It depends, of course, Bernie Taupin and Elton John, that's how they write.
Right.
Right. They've written some of the greatest songs of all time. So everybody writes different,
Right.
but that's just my way I write.
Sure. Since we're talking about a childhood prodigy and thinking about Michael, tell us what it was like to work with Tevin Campbell and how that introduction came about.
He's a talented guy, down to earth kid. That of course came through Nard, working with him, and then Tevin and I have become friends after that, and to the point it was a couple times I accompanied Tevin at Quincy's house.
Right.
He needed somebody to play at one of his parties or something. But yeah, very talented kid, naturally talented.
Sure. And then, of course, it'd be remiss. I mean, there's so many people to cover, but Larry Graham and this whole connection to Prince.
Oh, wow. Well, Larry played a big part in my career and life because back in 1985 on a project that Narada was producing, that's where I met my wife, who is Larry's sister.
Yes.
My wife came to the studio, just visiting her sister, and that's how I met her. And so Larry's my brother-in-law. So, but we've also, worked on a lot of projects together where he's the bass player, or I have a small little label out of England.
Right.
I go through David Nathan's Soul Music Records, and I released a project on Larry called Chillin'.
Right.
More of a showing off his vocal talents.
Yeah. Well, since you decided to go overseas, let's just open that door a little bit. Talk to me about just sort of the freedom, the reception, and the appreciation for soul music that exists overseas versus here.
Yeah, I came to appreciate their respect and appreciation for the soul music genre. I'd say much more so than we appreciate over here.
Yeah.
There was a time we did appreciate it, but they took it, they've taken it, and now it's like a really revered craft. And that's one of the reasons that I have this little label over there. We're able to introduce new talent as well as established talent over in the UK. We did product on not only Larry Graham, but Maurice White, his estate. I had written like 30 or 40 songs with Maurice and recorded them. And so after he passed, I talked to them about being able to release some of that. So we've done that. We have some music out by Lenny Williams.
Yes.
And then we're able to release new artists that we love that have that kind of talent.
Right.
Maybe these days are not really looked at here in America, especially the older ones.
Right. Absolutely. And is that how I believe you did a project with Two Pains, including one of our favorite artists, Frida Payne?
Yes, it was a Cliff Payne project.
Right.
And because I had worked with Frida before, I don't know, my brain thinks, kind of crazy. I said, why don't you do a duet with another Payne, and we'll call the song No Pain, No Gain. And we'll spell Payne, P-A-Y-N-E. And it worked out. They became not only good collaborators, but good friends, to where we did a second album on Cliff and a second duet that had that premise. See if I can remember the song. Oh, Yesterday's Pain, Tomorrow's Joy. That's the name of the second song. So yeah, but we had that freedom to do stuff like that over there. And one of that first one, No Pain, No Gain, I think went to #1 over there.
Yes, it did. Yeah. No, just incredible. Our show is called Music and Medicine. And when you hear those words, what does that mean to you? How does it speak to your heart?
Well, I appreciate what you do on your show. And I had an album. I must show you the cover.
Yes.
This is a big blow up of it, but it's Music as Medicine.
Yes, I see.
And every song on there kind of had a reference in the title to some kind of feeling good or health or things of that nature. And I've always thought that music is a healing force. And in my life, it's been a healing force, not only just all throughout my career, but just about a little over 4 years ago, I had a couple of strokes, and to where it kind of slowed me down physically, and of course that can affect you emotionally and mentally and every other kind of way. But music is what kind of helped save me, because I always, while I'm sitting there in the hospital bed, I got my phones and got to really appreciate all the music that I loved growing up. And then shortly after, when I was rehabilitating myself, I would get calls from friends, including Thom Bell. He called checking on me and said, "Put your hands on the piano, man.
Mhm.
Don't let that get stagnant." And
Right.
so I kept creating, and this label that I have with David Nathan, and we go through Warner Music Group. We put out music every 6 weeks,
Oh, wow.
whether it's a single or sometimes it's a full album or album collection. And even though I got slowed down by the stroke, we never missed a release.
Right. Wow.
Every 6 weeks, boom. So that helped me, look forward to, okay, I still got this music to work on, and I believe that helped me get rehabilitated fast.
Sure. On a deeper level, do you feel that you literally will use certain types of music to put you in certain moods, or to help you feel more creative, or to help you take you to a different place, even if that's being able to take a break and step away sometimes?
Definitely, definitely. That's the wonderful thing about having an appreciation for different genres, or even new genres. Like there's new kind of hybrid things that come my way. Maybe they've been there for a while, but being an old man, I'm I'm taught by my grandkids sometimes. Hey, Pop, have you ever heard this Afro beats or
Right.
whatever the style is? I'm like, let me check that out. I'm like, whoa,
Mhm.
it's great, and that inspires me.
Right. Were there some things about your health that you felt, okay, here are some things that I've learned and now I can implement them, especially given the history of a stroke and things like that, that you certainly might recommend to others as well?
Definitely, definitely. In the way of physical health, of course, just trying to stay a little more balanced as far as timing of diet and timing of exercise.
Right.
Of course, you have your schedule, you love your music and all that, but don't get too carried away where you forget that. And then, speaking of getting carried away, the musical, the business part, don't let that stress you out. Life's too short.
Sure.
No matter what's going on, uh, music is the main reason you got into it.
Right.
So don't let the business part of it stress you out.
Absolutely. I mean, words to live by. We're so appreciative. And you heard it here from Mr. Glass himself, 6 BMI Awards, 30 top 10 hits. His music has become the soundtrack of our lives. And yet there is a certain place and time where our health can certainly take precedence. And so slowing down to really smell the roses, but also exercise, eat, get that sleep, rest, and take care of yourself so that you continue to be productive in whatever you do, even if it's not in music. And certainly when it comes to the business side, there will be ups and downs. It's hard to always be on top, so to speak, but you can be mentally. And it's important to not let the stress of the business, as he says, to use his words, really pull you down or overwhelm you. So we want you to be creative. We want you to do what you love. We want you to be willing to bring a creative part into whatever work it is that you do, if it's in the industry or not. But certainly want you to take care of yourself. And Mr. Glass, we're so thankful for you being willing to give us a time to kind of walk through so many great songs, so many phenomenal artists, so
Thank
many
you.
wonderful sounds that you've given us.
Well, thank you
Thank
so
you
much
so
for
much.
allowing me to come on your platform here and speak my heart, mind and heart.
Absolutely. And I'd be totally remiss if I didn't do a big shout out to Cassandra Williams, a singer herself, who brought us together, and to Felton Pilot, who will also be bringing us together next week. when he turned 70. He's from Compunction, for those of you that may not know him. And we'll be celebrating in person and not virtually with Mr. Glass and Mr. Pilot that day. Can't wait to meet you and see you in person, and look forward to continued future collaborations. Thanks again.
Thank you.